Start immediately with chapter 1.1, Influences on the Environments. If you could please open up your textbooks so I can give you a little bit of an overview of what is going to happen in chapter 1.1, Influences on the Environments. The first document that I would like to show you is an overview document. It looks something like this. You won't have this in your textbook, but it just gives us a little bit of an overview of what's going to happen in this chapter. As you can see, it's a grade 11 paper 1. There's a picture of the textbook in Afrikaans. This is the first part of the term's work. It's all concerned with business in environments, and this specific chapter has 5 parts to it. You'll see as we go along, it's quite simple. We have done most of the groundwork in grade 10 already. So the first part starts off with to outline the components of the different environments. Then we get to the core of the chapter, the measure of control. We'll look at the measure of control that the business have over each environment. We have to identify challenges from the different environments. We have to explain how a business can control the business environments if they have to, and then the involvement of the macro environment. So if you open up your textbooks, your textbook will look something like this. It'll have a little bit of an overview. You'll see grade 11 paper 1, business environments, and we are specifically doing the chapter on the influences of the business environment. If you turn the page, we'll see here's the first question, and this is quite simple. It is just an overview. It's an outline of the micro market and macro environments. Now, we have done this in grade 10 pretty intensely. So this year, you should really just have an overview, an outline of what the different environments entail. So just for a bit of a refresh, firstly, the micro environment. The micro environment consists of the mission statement, the business objectives, the management and organizational structure, the resources, and then the organizational culture. As you can remember from last year, it is everything that is inside the business itself. Micro doesn't mean small, micro means internal, it means the business itself. So let's quickly move on to the market environment as an overview again. The market environment is directly outside of the business, just outside the business. As you can see there, it concerns the customers, the suppliers, the intermediaries, the competitors, trade unions, regulators, and alliances. So again, you can read through these definitions if you can't remember them properly, but please make a point that you at least can give a definition of each. Then the macro environment. We said that's the biggest environment, or the environment the furthest from the business itself. It's all about the technological environment, the economic environment, the political environment, the social environment, the physical environment, and the legal environment. Now, those environments spell the acronym PESTEL, and we will learn about PESTEL in the coming months, and especially in preparation for matric. Now, the core of this chapter is to answer the simple question: is what is the measure of control, or the extent of control that the business have over the different environments? So this is quite simple, but let's just look at it for a moment. The first question is explain reasons why the business have full control over the microenvironment. Now, this is very straightforward. The question is, how much control does the business have over itself? Okay, so that's quite simple. That the business have full control over itself, everything that goes on in the microenvironment. We said that the microenvironment has these 4 components of the microenvironment: the culture, the resources, and so forth. But we also have this 8 business functions that we studied last year, quite some detail, but we know that the business have full control over the microenvironment. Then we ask why does the business have limited control over the market environment? It is because it's not the business itself, it is outside the business, and we have limited control because we can influence certain role players in the market environment. In our market environment, we have our competitors. If we lower our prices, then the competitor will act. We can't control them directly, but indirectly we can control them. They work independently from our business, but if we package a 2-for-1 deal, we might draw more customers. So we will influence customer behavior if our products is of a better quality or a better price. So we have some influence there. And lastly, we have no control over the macro environment. So the macro environment, let's just maybe think of something that's called the physical environment or the natural environment. We have no control over the natural environment. If it rains, it rains. If it's drought, it's drought. You can't control any of that. You can't control interest rates. You can't control. You as a business can't control interest rates. You can't control inflation rates, or exchange rates, or anything in the economy. As an individual business, you cannot control that. So that means that, the business have no control over the macro environment, everything that is outside the business. Right. Now, how is this going to be asked? So the next part that is very important is, how am I going to ask this to you in the exam? Yes, I can ask you for the definitions, anything that's in the textbook, but this is the main part, especially for next year as well, for matric. I will give you a bit of a scenario like this. Gr11E1.1 mines in this instance. They will, and then I will give you a few sentences. The first sentence will be, their suppliers of mining equipment have increased their prices. Now this is very important, because suppliers, we know, is part of the market environment. So now I give you this little table which you have to complete. You put the challenge, which is just a copy and paste from the scenario. You link that, identify that as the market environment, and you know that we have limited control over the market environment. The supervisor does not have a good working relationship with his employees. So employees and supervisor, we know that is part of the microenvironment, and we have full control over the microenvironment. Gr11E1.1 mines can no longer export their products. Exports and exchange rate, that is something we cannot control. It's part of the macro environment, which again we have no control over. So this is a 9-mark question, guys, and it's very, very easy, but please use this as an example for when the class test on this work comes. The next part, we're over the hill now for this chapter. We're going downhill. The next question is to describe how the business can control the business environments. Now, we said already that the business has full control over the microenvironment, and now it's practical ways of how we can do it. Establishing a mission and a vision, identifying strategies, ensuring that resources are used in efficient ways. Influence over the market environment. We know we have less influence over the market environment, but here we talk specifically about a marketing strategy. Marketing strategies will come later in this year. We're going to do the marketing function in detail. So a proper marketing function will definitely give you some control over the market environment. And then lastly, the influence over the macro environment. Now remember, we said we have no control over the macro environment, but we can indirectly adapt and influence this environment, especially through things like combined efforts, combined power to persuade government, in groups to harness collective power. As maybe a few companies in a specific industry, we can try to lobby and influence the environment to a certain extent, but we and ultimately we will have to adapt to the challenges of the macro environment. This leaves us with the involvement in the macro environment, which is the last question. And we asked the question, how can a business be involved in the macro environment? And things like, for example, influencing your suppliers by signing long-term contracts, lobbying, bargaining power, we've talked about that, strategic alliances, knowing government regulations, new technologies, impact on the environment. That's how a business can be involved in the macro environment. And that obviously leads to certain benefits that the business will reap when they are involved in the macro environment. So the business can more accurately predict future events, and they can contribute to a healthier, more skilled, productive workforce, etc., etc. So guys, there you have it. This is the overview of the chapter. You should please take a look at every question that is mentioned here and the answers as they are. As I've mentioned before, what the core of the chapter is, the extent or the measure of control. So please make sure that you understand that, and please prepare for a class test when we see you again. Thank you very much for your time. I hope you have a good evening.